Good morning, everyone. Pam Jacobson, your host of Three Things You Need to Know. Welcome. We are about 9 weeks now into our Rejuvenation, Rebuild, Reset series, where we are really working for our best health to optimize our health foundation in 2021. I'd love to have by the end of the year for all of us to say, I was really able to do it this year, that it's not just another year of missed New Year's resolutions and missed opportunity for health. We started out talking about the importance of detoxification, and each week I've been just discussing things that you could be doing on your own to really optimize the health foundation. And I would be really remiss if I did not at some point end up talking about your gut, your digestive system. So we're going to talk about that today. The title of today's program is, do you have a healthy gut, and how would you know? So I think this is a very legitimate topic, and one that many of us somewhat take for granted and have, I think, learned over time to adapt to not having a healthy gut. So super important topic, and I'm really happy to be able to talk to you about it today. If you're new and you're just joining us, all of my information is in the chat area. You can go on the website. You can learn more about me. Be sure to go back to at least the beginning of this year and look at the series, because there's a lot of great information, but each show stands on its own, so you'll definitely learn some good things today. So gut, what does that mean? What's the definition of that? Well, if you Google that and you look online, you'll see that it largely refers to the digestive system, which has many components, organs, function from the mouth to the rectum. But when in functional medicine, and when I in particular think about gut, I think about probably what would be one of the most important functions, which happens in your small intestine. That's kind of where the rubber meets the road. That's where the extraction of nutrients from the foods you've eaten occurs, in the small intestine. Everything above that is the process of digesting the food or the medication or the supplement that you've taken down into its most basic structure, which is called chyme. And that's then passed to the small intestine from the stomach. So that upper digestion is all about basically digesting and breaking things down. Once it moves into the small intestine, now it's about absorption, right? Or the ability to get the nutrients or active ingredients out of the medication that you've taken and deliver that into the bloodstream, right? And so when I think about gut, I think about largely that process. However, there are lots of things that happen from the mouth to the anus that can go wrong in digestion. And so I think it's important to really think about and to discuss today, how could you self-assess and determine, am I maybe having some problems? And more importantly, where would I go for that? Because I can tell you most of the time it's not going to be to your conventional physician unless we really think there's a disease process going on. So, I do in my practice, one of the key evaluations, testing techniques that I use when I'm working with a client is a stool study that takes about 3 days to do, that gives me function. So most of us, and hopefully all of you out there, especially if you're my age, are regularly getting your colonoscopy screening, right? We need a baseline. I think even earlier now, it used to be 50, and I believe they've moved that time up. I mean, we're starting to see colon cancer in really young people, 30s, 40s. So, getting a baseline screening relatively early, and then depending on what's found in that screening, your doctor will advise you on how often, or if you have a family history of colon cancer. That is a visual exam of the inside of your large intestine, right? It can only go up to the bottom of the small intestine. You can't go in and look at the small intestine. It's really just looking at the large intestine. And we're really looking for things like lesions and tumors and growths and pockets and inflammation along the lining as we go up and visually inspect that with the camera. When we do a stool study, we're really looking more at function. What happened from the time I ate the food until the time that the rest of it was eliminated in my stool. It can tell me many things about my digestive enzyme process, how well I did at digesting the food, then what happened in the small intestine, was I able to absorb, how much fat is in the stool, how much protein. So we can really see if you're digesting and absorbing. We can see if there's inflammatory process. We can see if there's blood. which is always a concern for things like cancer. We can see if you're eating the right kinds of fiber, if there's overgrowth of things that shouldn't be there, like bacteria, fungus, parasites. We can see if you're good bacteria, which are the good. You hear about this. You've heard the term microbiome. We have trillions of these different types of bacteria. About 37 pounds of your body weight actually is the good bacteria that live in the large intestine, predominantly in the large intestine, and they have many functions, right? They're very much involved in brain function, immune function, hormone balance. I mean, they have a lot of jobs, but they get fed in our large intestine, so that's where they live, right? So they predominantly live there. And the fibers from the foods, largely vegetables and fruits that we're eating, are what they thrive on. And when I do the stool study, I can see, are you eating enough of the right kind of fiber? What does your good microbiome bacteria look like? Is it balanced? And so there's a lot of really great information that comes from a functional gut study versus a visual check to make sure it's more of a screening to make sure that you don't have a pre-cancer condition or cancer or some other type of disease, maybe Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, those types of things. So all along that stool study that I do, I'm able to see, but there are ways that you can tell before you even have a test like that done. So how do I know? The question was, how do I know if my gut's healthy? Well, if you are on any medication for a digestive symptom, such as a proton pump inhibitor, Nexium, Prilosec, omeprazole, an antacid, maybe you take Tums or Rolaids or something like that on a regular basis. If you're on any kind of an aid, whether over the counter or prescribed for constipation, for loose stool or diarrhea, if you've been told that you have IBS or IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, if you get bloated frequently, on a regular basis, if you have bowel irregularity where you don't have a bowel movement, every single day at least once, then you don't have a healthy gut, right? So those are some of the sort of hallmarks or signs that the body will send you to let you know that your gut is not healthy. Most of us then will go off to our conventional physician. And remember, I've talked about this before, in our conventional medical system, they're really more about disease identification, acute care. So when it comes to our digestive health, they're a bit challenged there, right? I mean, we can do some imaging studies, and certainly if you have a cancer or a lesion or something like that, you want your gastroenterologist or your colorectal surgeon that would be the right place to be, right? You're going to need to have a surgical procedure, maybe treatment. But most of us, before we get to that place, had many opportunities to intervene. Generally, we'll have had problems with bowel function for many years before we develop a problem, such as ulcerative colitis or something like that. And we could have intervened if we didn't just accept and adapt. And I think that's a problem in our culture particularly, is that we don't see the messages that our body sends us on a daily basis as important, messages that we need to take action on. And furthermore, we don't learn about what kind of action we should be taking. So I hope that that's what you'll get out of the program today. So I want to kind of start with what I see in the stool study and what are some of the things that you could be doing. So first and foremost, and if you go back and remind yourself with the videos and shows that I've done, not only just this year, but last year, I've already talked about the 4 pillars of the health foundation, and this applies to gut health, right? If you're not optimizing your sleep, if you're not especially managing stress, right? Stress has a huge impact on our gut function, because remember, I've used the lion in the jungle analogy. If you're in the jungle all day running from the lion, a normal digestive process just isn't really necessary. So we'll see the digestive system constantly, compromised or shunted because we're too busy producing stress hormone and working on survival versus normal restoration of normal function. So stress response management, guys, for gut health is absolutely critical. Movement, right? Exercise daily is really important to, the digestive system is a motility. It's a movement system. So if we are sedentary, we're sitting all day, we're not moving, we're not exercising, then we're going to have issues with motility in the digestive system. And then obviously nutrition is really critical for the digestive system. If you've got a really high sugar diet or really poor fiber diet, or a diet that is high in bad fats, you're going to impact the ability for the digestive system to function properly. So it really starts again at those 4 pillars. And if you're not currently, if you don't currently have a daily self-care regimen that's comprised of attention in all 4 of those pillars, I would say for those of you who aren't doing that, to go back and start there, because oftentimes just cleaning up your act in those 4 pillars can make a big difference with digestive health. For those of you that are maybe already doing some of that, but found yourself in a situation where, already were on some type of medication or already really suffering with a lot of digestive symptoms, then what I would say is I would encourage you to get a gut function study done so that we can see where specifically in the process we might be challenged, and we could give very targeted types of treatment for that. But what I can tell you, and after having seen thousands really over the last 15 years, I've done stool studies on almost every patient that I've seen, that the key areas that I see are most compromised: digestive enzyme process, right? The pancreas is responsible for producing enzymes that help us break down fats and proteins and carbs. And they come from other places too, but predominantly the pancreas, the liver produces some. These enzyme processes can become deficient. And so often for many of us, taking just a helpful digestive enzyme at the beginning of a meal can really make the process of breaking down the food and getting the nutrients absorbed. Those digestive enzymes can be helpful. And those are really easy, simple things you can buy over the counter. For those of you that are a client of mine already or want access to an online distributor of supplements that are clean and things I trust, you can reach out and let me know. I use Full Script online service. And most of you know that I love all the big nutraceutical companies out there, but I'm particularly fond of the digestive enzymes from Orthomolecular because I've had a lot of good success with those. But essentially the thing to know about digestive enzymes is they must be taken when you start the meal, right? It's not like any other supplement that you just take anytime during the day. You must take them before the start of your meal. And I want to talk about another part of the process, which is once the food is in the stomach, that's really where the acidic environment of the stomach kind of takes the final shot at the food that you've eaten and breaking it down, preparing to send it to the small intestine for absorption. So in the stomach, that acidic environment is really critical. But unfortunately for many of us, it can, when there is a compromise to the production of that acid, it can result in an overproduction, right? The body, sort of having a knee-jerk reaction, and now we produce too much acid. We get reflux. We go to the doctor. We get put on a proton pump inhibitor, or we self-medicate with antacids. What I want to say is, if you are one of those people that is doing something like that on a regular basis, you really need to hear this message. Those things used long-term can create many, many issues with absorption. We are seeing things like osteoporosis with long-term use of these. And it is now standard of care in conventional medicine, and always was, but we just didn't pay attention to it. We put people on these drugs and leave them on them because they do help your symptoms, but they also basically render you not able to absorb the nutrients from your food or even the active ingredients, oftentimes from medication, supplements. So they are intended to be a short-term treatment to allow for the lining of the stomach to heal and to settle down, especially if you have ulcers. So they are very important drugs, but they weren't intended to be used long-term. So for those of you who are on and have been on these types of drugs, you really need to, first of all, clean up your act and get your digestive system healthy, and then work with your doctor to properly get off of those medications. You should never stop a proton pump inhibitor kind of cold turkey. It should be done in a very titrated fashion. But I just wanted to make it clear that, the stomach environment being in its natural state is critically important for digestion and absorption of the nutrients from the food that we're eating. So, digestive enzymes will help with that upper digestive process, helping to start to break things down. Once it gets into the stomach, that's all about the stomach acid. And if you are using anything to cut back on the production of stomach acid, that is a problem. You are definitely a person who does not have a healthy gut. My recommendation, again, would be really pay attention to your 4 pillars, really clean up your diet. If that doesn't begin to take care of the problem, then, I would be tested to see if there's maybe something else going on. But most of the time, that will take care of it, and you can get off of those medications. So digestion and absorption is a key thing to understand. You can use digestive enzymes. You can supplement stomach acid using something called betaine, HCl, hydrochloride. That will help, because stomach acid deficiency is a problem for most of us, right? So most of your digestive enzymes will have a little bit of that in it. Digestive enzyme dosing, you typically would start with 1. I have my patients start with 1 at the beginning of each meal, and maybe go up to 2 after a week or so. If you get a slight burn, then that's enough. But I usually don't have you take more than a couple of digestive enzymes before each meal. And again, I think this is something you could do on your own to see if it helps. Many people really notice a difference when they use digestive enzymes before a meal. The second area that's measured in a gut function study is inflammation. And we're looking at inflammation in a few different ways. What many of you don't know is that a large percentage of your immune system is housed in the lining of the small intestine. And the reason for that is because when the chyme, the digested food, goes into the small intestine, it will separate the nutrients from the food and then filter those down into the bloodstream. Well, before anything can get into the bloodstream, the immune system needs to have an inspection and decide whether or not that's safe. And so a big part of our immune function happens in the digestive system, because that is a system that allows things from the outside to enter in a safe way into the body, to be broken down and to be inspected by the immune system before they actually get into the bloodstream and go out to all of our cellular structure. So a beautifully complicated, amazing system that we all just take for granted that it's going to work okay. And we tend to throw stuff down there without any consideration for the damage that we're creating in doing that, right? Drugs, supplements, sometimes overuse of supplements, poor diet. We don't consider how, poor sleep and not managing stress and not moving impact that system. So I can't impress upon you enough, if you do not have consistently healthy gut function, you will absolutely have disease process at some point. So gut function, super important. Inflammation is the second area I was talking about. We can see when the immune system is a problem, right? If it is reacting, if we've got autoimmune conditions in the body, or if we do have an overgrowth or a parasitic infestation, which happens more frequently than you would think in our culture. It's interesting. I do a lot of these studies, and I find parasites on a regular basis for people who don't travel and don't go to places where we would expect parasites to come from. We actually have an abundance of them here in our own culture. So those can incite a constant immune response, which will show this inflammatory process. So oftentimes these things don't necessarily cause symptoms, right? So sometimes you can have problems with the gut and not know it because you don't have any kind of a symptom to tell. So my rule of thumb for myself personally is I do a gut function study on myself once a year. That way I know during the year, did I get exposed to something? Did I not do such a good job with my self-care? And do I, have an area in my gut function that I need to be concerned about that perhaps I'm not having a symptom for? The majority of you that have gut issues are going to have symptoms, right? You're going to have constipation. You're going to have alternating constipation, diarrhea, loose stool. and, reflux or indigestion regularly, bloating, so there's a lot of symptoms the digestive system gives us when it's not working well. But we've also all become really good at just ignoring those and moving on. Oh, that's just normal. I ate the wrong thing, or I always feel that way when I eat too much pizza, So it is a system that's pretty prolific in its messaging, and one that I'm going to strongly encourage you all to pay very close attention to. So for inflammatory response, some simple things that you can do for inflammation in the digestive system are use aloe, right? Most of the anti-inflammatory digestive supplementation treatments that I use for my patients will have slippery elm, aloe, marshmallow, glutamine, things that calm down that lining, calm down that inflammatory process, calm down that immune response in the gut. So again, things that are really easy to get your hands on, you can buy, aloe liquid, and you can put it in a smoothie, and so those are definitely things you can try. Apple cider vinegar, another thing that can be really helpful for the digestive system. Most of us need to cut that with some water. I would not suggest that you just take it straight. You'll want to put it in a little bit of water. An eighth of a teaspoon of baking soda can be also helpful. Not something that you want to use, again, if it's something you need to use on a regular basis for things like indigestion, then you need to look deeper at what's going on with the gut. The next area on my stool function study is looking at fiber and the good bacteria, right? So I said earlier, the good bacteria live in the large intestine because that's where they eat, but they're pretty picky about what they eat. They want a very particular type of fiber, the type of fiber that comes from things like fibrous vegetables, or what we call prebiotic. You can Google that and get a list. Prebiotic foods, fermented foods can help with that. But if we're not eating the right kind of fiber, and unfortunately, it's not the fiber that we were raised believing, Cheerios and bread, and most of your processed foods do not give you the right type of fiber. They might give you a bulking fiber, but they don't give you the fiber that the microbiome, your good bacteria, thrive on. And we can tell in this test how good of a job you're doing, right? Because when those bacteria are happy, they produce something called short chain fatty acids, which gives us back the benefit. You feed me well, I will give you back a gift, and that's short chain fatty acids, and they help protect the colon from diseases like cancer. So we want to be eating that right kind of fiber, but I think many of us are misled into believing that we can take Metamucil, or we can eat oatmeal and those types of fibers, and then that's all that's going to be required. And that is not true. So understanding that and kind of having a benchmark, am I eating enough? What I would say is 2 handfuls of veggies at each meal, right? That's what we're talking about. And Google prebiotic foods and get a list, right? Asparagus is on that list, jicama, I think artichoke, I think strawberries are on there, avocado. And it's mostly, you're going to see, it's mostly going to be fruits and vegetables. There are a few, nuts and seeds and grain fibers that qualify, but a lot of it is going to be fruits and veggies. So if you just get a wide variety of fruits and veggies and 2 handfuls of veggies at each meal, you should be pretty close to what you need there. The next area that we're looking at in the stool study is actually the microbiome itself, the good bacteria. We do have the ability to measure some, not the trillions of different kinds there are, and we don't even completely understand what they all do. But what we do, at least globally, understand is that they're pretty important, and without them, we don't live and we can't function. And there's a lot of them, right? Like I said earlier, about 37 pounds of your body weight is all this bacteria that we're carrying around that live inside of us, that actually are responsible for many of the processes that keep us alive. So very important for us to know about the microbiome and to know how to care for the microbiome. And again, it's very impacted by things like antibiotics, which can kill it off, stress, poor diet, lack of exercise, not sleeping well. So your daily self-care regimen is still your number one most important job when it comes to your gut health. But we can look at some basics of the microbiome to help us determine where there may be some really big imbalances and what we can do about that. Oftentimes we will use, aside from all the lifestyle things I mentioned, which is always the first place to start, we may augment the microbiome by giving you probiotic. Now, what I want to say about probiotics is they don't really correct the microbiome or correct the digestive dysfunction. They sort of are a fill in the gap for the day kind of thing. So, for those of you that do have gut dysfunction that use a probiotic that feel better, you need to probably use that probiotic on a regular basis. However, there is some science to indicate that you probably should be switching up your probiotic. There's lots of different, strains and compounds and combinations out there. And not all of them are created equal, and certainly not all of them are great or really work. These are live bacteria. So, there was an expose done a few years ago by, 2020 or Dateline, that went to a health food store or multiple stores and pulled these things off the shelf and tested them, and they were all dead. That there was no live bacteria in them. And so, there was a big controversy about whether or not probiotics are really helpful. We've learned a lot, and the manufacturing and the ability to test whether the organisms are live has really come a long way. So I do think when it comes to probiotics, you're probably better off getting them from a known source. And I do think getting a test done is helpful, because then we know where the imbalances are and we can better sort of choose the best, probiotic supplement. But bottom line is, it won't hurt you, and it's not a bad idea to try it out to see if it makes a difference in the regularity of your bowels or perhaps your digestive symptoms. So the microbiome, super important, important to understand, how to care for that microbiome. The next area of the testing is looking for the things that shouldn't be there, right? So there are some bacteria that grow that aren't, as long as they play nice in the sandbox, they can stay. But once they overgrow, they're welcome. They can cause issues, especially immune function issues, because again, the immune system's there to protect us. And so if things are starting to not be in their normal balanced state, the immune system is going to react to that. And if you're somebody that already has an immune disease, an autoimmune condition, this could exacerbate that issue. So we really, really want to keep the immune system balanced and happy, and making sure that we don't have hangers on, things we're hosting that we don't want to host, is important. So we look at that in the stool test. We look for bacterial overgrowth. We look for fungal overgrowth, right? You can have yeasts or certain types of yeast like Candida and other fungal overgrowths in the digestive system, particularly if you eat a lot of sugar. So if you're somebody who's craving a lot of sugar and carbs, it's a good idea to look at that balance. And then parasites, as I mentioned earlier, we always look for parasites because they can be there. And though many of the domestic parasites that we would be coming into contact with aren't considered pathologic or create disease, they certainly do create immune response. And so again, for those of us that already have some immune issues, important to know. And do something about. We can botanically treat these things in most cases without having to use any kind of a pharmaceutical medication. And then finally, we are looking at things like blood in the stool. I've had a few patients where their test came back with blood in the stool, and you can't see it, right? Bleeding that's coming from higher up in the digestive system, higher up in the colon, that is due to maybe a cancerous lesion, is not something that you can typically visualize in the stool. If you can actually see blood on the toilet paper in the stool, usually that is some type of a problem, much lower. Doesn't mean that it's not cancerous, but most of the time it's going to be an internal hemorrhoid or some type of a tear in the tissue. It's what we call occult blood, that type of blood that can't be seen. That is often the first indication that there may be a colon cancer or something like that. So we do look for that. And we also look for a bacteria called H. pylori, which is in the stomach and is a precursor to ulcers and stomach cancer. So the testing that I do, it's called a GI function study, is pretty comprehensive in looking at GI function. I do encourage you, if you've never had it done, to get a baseline. If you've had it done, but it's been over a year, and especially if you're having any kind of digestive issues, or let's say you're really, you think you're pretty diligent with your self-care plan, but you just don't seem to be making the progress that you think you should, it may be time to look at what's going on in the digestive system. Because if we think about digestive function, it really is the fuel tank for the body, right? So I'm eating all this food all day long. This is my fuel to help me, all the functions in my body and to help me be able to get through my day and have energy and do all the things that I want to do. And if I'm not able to extract the nutrients from the fuel and get them to the right place in my body to do their job, then I'm not going to make progress, even though I might be doing my sleep hygiene and doing my meditation every day and trying to clean up my diet and doing my exercise. If there's already an issue in the digestive system, it may need to be treated, right? We may need to get rid of the bad bacteria, support the good bacteria, augment digestive enzymes. So I can't impress enough upon you the importance of this. And I've got my contact information here. I'm happy to just answer questions. You don't have to work with me, or there's lots of people out there that can help you get tested. But at the very least, if you don't feel like now that you know kind of how to evaluate yourself for gut function, if you feel like there may be issues, you could start with some of the things that I mentioned. Certainly look at your daily self-care. Give yourself a couple of months. If things don't seem to be changing, then maybe it's time to follow up with somebody like me that can help you get the test. Certainly, if you have not had your screening exam, your colonoscopy, and you're in the age group, I would say start there to be sure that you don't have any other disease process that you need to know about. So I hope you found this helpful. I love it when I get your comments and feedback and your questions. I'd like to know what you want to know more about. I'm here every Wednesday at 9 a.m., usually live. And also, if you want, I noticed that the sessions where I interview someone are the most viewed, and I love interviewing people. So if you're someone who's watching this, or you have somebody in mind that you would like me to see if I can interview on my program, please let me know. Or if you are someone who I could interview that has a specialty or an area that people would want to know more about, I'm happy to entertain that as well. So I hope you all have an amazing week. And I will be here 9 o'clock next Wednesday to speak with you all again. Take care.